Hello and welcome back to the Lib Dem Podcast. We've had a few weeks off for summer and recovering from all the parliamentary by-elections we keep winning, but we are back and we've got a bumper episode full of lots of issues, whether that's the sewage issue, whether it's the cost of living crisis, the energy crisis, what's happening with the Tories, and will there be a general election this year? So we're going to discuss all that in the round with our fantastic panel. But before we do that, I want to give a quick shout out to our wonderful Patreon subscribers who do send us a little bit of money every month, because this podcast is completely done by volunteers. We do it in our own time. You can probably tell by the quality of it. But we do appreciate everything you give to help us keep this podcast going. And an exciting announcement, which we have put online, is actually the podcast will be at conference. We are going to be doing shows where you can come and see us, and we're going to have a special gift giveaway as well. So thank you to all those patrons. Tom doesn't know that because he's actually paying for it. But we'll bleed on to our brilliant panel. And the first up is Tom Morrison, who is our excellent parliamentary candidate for Cheadle and also a Stockport council. Hi, Tom. Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a while since I've been on. I'm super excited.
Yeah, the really ratings have soared. It's been fantastic.
Nice.
And joining us is the grandee of Liverpool is Mr. Richard Kemp. How are you doing, Richard?
I'm coping very well, but anything that alludes to my age will not be appreciated, Mr. Potter.
Oh yeah, grandee. You can't really be a young grandee.
You have to be old to be a grandee.
And obviously, the princess of Barnsley Lib Dems, we have Hannah Kitchen joining us again. How are you doing, Hannah?
And that's a new one, John. I don't think anyone's ever called me a princess before.
No, not especially after they've met you. but thank you very much, the whole panel. Right, we're going to go straight into some of the big issues that are coming out, and the one that's been throughout the summer and actually came up at the end of last year is about sewage. And the sewage issue that's really seems to have not been handled particularly well by the Tories and actually keeps on cropping up. So, Tom, do you want to go first on this in terms of why do you think the issue of the sewage and the water companies has really caught a light? That's probably the bad analogy to use, but why is that still hurting the Tories?
I think this plays to everything that is already kind of seen as unacceptable about the Conservative Party, because it involves, not only does it involve kind of environmental damage at a massive scale, but it involves bonuses to people that quite frankly don't deserve the amount of riches they're getting each year. Now, this is a massive issue in Cheadle, where we've found statistics that over the last year, it was like for 137 days, raw sewage was being pumped into the rivers. We've had reports from residents of like animals, dogs, pets getting ill from being just paddling around in streams. I went to a community group a couple of weeks ago, and actually the smell around this park, just from the brook there, it's unbelievable. So it's not just got attention, John. It's got people so angry, because, without sounding too grandiose and patriotic about it, but Britain is a green and pleasant land, isn't it? And we take pride in our forests, we take pride in our woods and nature reserves, and our rivers and waterways are a huge. So the idea that sewage is being pumped into them is quite frankly disgusting. We've seen that image as well from the south, where the sewage is just kind of going in and going in and going in. It plays to everything that is just so disgusting about the way our utilities companies treat residents and our natural environment. And I think it's right that we're taking a stand. And I'm a bit shocked actually that it only seems to be the Lib Dems that are really taking a stand on this. It doesn't seem to be playing a part in the Labour Party's kind of thinking. I don't know about the Green Party. I haven't seen any. Well, I rarely see anything from the Green Party anyway. But I don't know if they've been talking about it. But it just seems that it's only the Lib Dems as a political party that are talking about it, which I think we need to carry on, because it's working in a political sense because it's getting lots of attention, but also it's a moral outrage that this is happening. So we should be fighting it.
Is it, Richard, a sense that things have gone backwards, that we had as a country, we had improved our beaches and our riverways, and actually it just seems to be, and it's a very physical and very visual way of saying actually things are a bit shit.
I think there are three things coming together in which people now clearly see the relationship between excess profit and poor services. So you've got the really graphic situation whereby you go to your local beach, your brook, your stream, and it smells and it's disgusting. And you can see then that someone getting 1.6 million a year bonus, as they do from United Utilities, really strikes home. When if the utility is working okay, then that connection isn't made. You then tie that to the railways, which are heavily subsidised now, although they're private sector. But if you want to go from Manchester to London, your is reduced from 3 an hour to 1 an hour, and there'd been 4 knockbacks on the from Liverpool. And then you look at the whole of the power crisis. And again, as Tom was saying before about water, the headlines today relate to a Lib Dem survey about 25% of people not going to use their heating. And that's really the Lib Dems striking home time and time again in the summer and getting a huge amount of publicity compared to the size of our parliamentary party. So whoever's doing this stuff down there, well done all, but you're really striking a chord with the people of the UK at the moment.
And before bringing Hannah, I suppose just for listeners, we should talk about how this all came about. Because actually, for me, the sewage issue was the time when I think Johnson first started to lose his MPs, because back at the end of last year, what happened was a series of votes and amendments on tougher regulations that were to be put onto water companies, and the government, the Johnson government, marched their MPs to make sure they voted against them, and then U-turned about a few days later, and it was the first time that was the whole kind of mechanics of number 10 was brought into question, and since then it obviously hasn't been fixed. So it was kind of a sea change in also the perception of the Tories in number 10 that actually they haven't quite got their finger on the pulse with this stuff. But Hannah, I mean, what, as anyone who has looked into this issue knows, that all sewage companies under extreme heavy rain know that sometimes there has to be some sewage jettisoned into waterways because the system can't cope. But what we're finding now is that even in the middle of one of the driest and hottest spring summers that we've had, tons and tons of sewage is regularly going into our waterways.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely disgusting, isn't it? I mean, I've just been on holiday with my family down to Dorset, down to the Jurassic Coast down there, which is absolutely beautiful. And I believe not the dirtiest part of the country, but, just before we went away, I saw a little thing on Twitter about, the percentage of beaches and oceans that were considered clean. And in Portugal, where we went earlier this summer, it's something like 89% of the beaches and the water is clean and good for swimming. In the UK, it's 17%. 17%. And it's disgusting. And and the sea in Dorset last week, loads of people were in it, and my kids were in it. And I was just mostly thinking, keep your mouth shut, just in case anything splashes in your mouth. And, let's have a shower as soon as we get home, because, maybe that beach is clean. My husband said he'd read and it was, but just seeing those stats and knowing about the lack of regulation of the water companies and the sewage processing, I know that there is a really high risk that little stream that's running down the beach into the sea is actually just raw sewage. Yeah. And there's kids paddling in it.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot about how I got a bit too polite there, John. I put my little hand up and I thought, no, hang on, this is the Lib Dem Pod. I should just pile in. This is far too polite. I think I absolutely agree with Hannah. It's like it's this weird world that we suddenly live in, isn't it? That where we're now like, we can't take our beaches for granted. We've just got to be like kind of, oh, it could just actually be a cesspit that we're going in. But you mentioned about how like there is this And quite rightly, there is this thing of if there's a bit of an overspill or something, then we're used to the sewage just kind of being put in like sporadically. But let's not forget that's because of years and years and years of underinvestment in like our sewage systems. So I had full cards on the table at the moment. I had a really snotty email from United Utilities because I dared set up a petition against them dumping sewage into the Mickerbrook, which goes through Cheadle constituency. And I haven't responded yet because the whole email is just such a fantastic piece of writing, which I don't really know whether it's a joke or not. But actually, the thing that really wound me up on this is that the UU are talking about how that this is a Victorian sewage system and it needs more investment. It's got to be done very carefully. It's like the Victorian era was just like yesterday. I'm sorry, it's ridiculous. This is years and years and years of underinvestment by the water companies because they have been paying these bonuses. They have been paying their shareholders huge amounts of dividends each year. And we haven't even started talking about water leaks and how we're losing water on a daily basis across this country because they haven't sorted the pipes out yet. I think a lot more anger needs to be shown at the way the water companies have been treating us.
Hannah, you want to come in, but just before you do come back in, Hannah, one of the points that some people that try and defend the water companies say, well, because Britain was industrialised early, then somehow we have more, our system is older. Really, compared to other Western countries in Europe, it's just a whole load of rubbish. Hannah.
Yeah, so you asked sort of at the start of the podcast, why is this issue sort of gained so much traction with the public? And I think it's because I think if you were to take it in isolation, because let's be honest, the cleanliness of our rivers and beaches, it isn't a new thing. They haven't been gold standard really sort of ever. They got better and now they're getting worse again. But I think as an isolated issue, it is something that people, can perhaps park or put to one side. But what we've got this summer is we've got a whole host of utilities stuff, and particularly water company stuff, that's all piling on top. So I was going to mention, obviously, Tom's just brought it up, the hose pipe bans that are in force at the moment. The absolute gall of Yorkshire Water to implement a hose pipe ban when you look at the amount of water that is lost through the system due to leaks. And I know it's not just Yorkshire Water, it's every single water company across the country. They lose a colossal amount of water due to leaks. So, they are wasting water. Absolutely fine. Ask your end users to moderate their use, but don't penalise them for using water. At the end of an incredibly hot summer, there's people are growing their own vegetables. People are trying to cut back on their costs. You're now telling people they can't water those vegetables, to feed their family. And you're paying massive, massive bonuses to your directors. So it's not that you're skint. It's just that, you thought you'd penalise your end users. And all the water's absolutely filthy. And then you've also got the fact as well that, I know this isn't necessarily the water company, but people are paying absolutely colossal amounts of money for their utilities at the moment. That people's gas and electric bills, I know we're coming on to this, but I think that ties into why the behaviour of the water companies is rankling people so much at the moment, because we are paying for a service, fundamentally. And people are not just paying for a service, they're paying through the nose for services at the minute. And these are for essentials. We take running water for granted, but so we should. We're one of the most developed countries in the world. It's absolutely fine that people should be able to turn their tap on and expect clean, cheap, reliable water to come out. And I think that's why the sewage issue has really got people's backs up at the moment, because it isn't just that. It's part of a wider picture of just absolutely taking the mick out of its customers by water companies, utilities companies, and really the government in general, to be perfectly honest.
Hello, John from the Lib Dem Podcast here. We are delighted to say that this episode is sponsored by Prater Rains. Now more than ever, you need a professional-looking online presence and website. Praetor Rains have been helping Liberal Democrat campaigns succeed for 18 years. Their Lib Dem Foci package combines a website, social media and email system to help Lib Dems win. You'll receive great support from real people, fair pricing and a huge range of features to choose from. Praetor Rains are already the bespoke developers for Lighthouse, Lib Dem Draw Online and the LD Directory. They combine a talented system design with an unrivaled understanding of our party, our data and our systems. To find out more, check out the Praetor Rains website at praetorrains.co.uk/liberal-democrats. I wonder if Labour, and I'm interested to know what the panel think of this, so Labour at the moment are terrified of themselves a lot of the time. You can see it particularly with the Brexit issue, absolutely under no circumstances can we ever mention Brexit again because of what happened at the last election. I also wonder if utilities, potential nationalisation and what they were, the platform they stood on in 2019 is terrifying because they want that break from Corbyn. That's been Keir Starmer's number one plan, is to break from the Corbyn era. And I wonder if they're terrified of being seen as continuation Corbyn because of it. Now, Tom, we'll go on to energy bills because this is by far the biggest story that's happening at the moment. I was driving back from a shoot in the Midlands and Martin, on the day the price cap went up, and Martin Lewis, who seems to be the money saving expert, seems to be the most functioning government we have at the moment, is one guy trying to help people. And to put it into some kind of context, so I am in a very average semi-detached house, so I am virtually the perfect typical house. My bills have gone up from £1,000 a year to an estimated £5,000 a year. That's what, and so we see these percentage increases. Oh, it's gone up 78% in October and it's going to go up 58%. No, actually, by the time April hits, it'll have gone up 500% compared to what I was paying. And I'm in a position where I might be able to earn more money, but people with fixed incomes have no chance at all. And for the whole, because we knew about this in March, and then we got further information about it in May. And I was just of the opinion that they can't just let it slide, the government. They can't do it. There has to be some sort of government intervention here. But, Tom, it doesn't look like they're going to be doing it. Or if they are doing it, they're being absolutely dragged there, kicking and screaming.
Yeah, this is the first time this has ever happened to me. Is I had a surgery about 2 weeks ago, and someone came in to talk about the cost of living, and it's the first time it's ever happened. They broke down into tears just through the kind of panic, fear, anxiety that they and there was a real uncertainty. It was the uncertainty that was causing this as well. And there are councils across the country now that are setting up these warm spaces schemes where they're using church halls, school halls, other public spaces, libraries, where they can put the heating on and people can come in and spend the day there, have a cup of tea, have some lunch. And that is it's like food banks. When people are setting these things up, that is commended because they're tackling a problem. But it's absolutely disgusting that in this day and age that is even needed. That solution is needed.
And as someone, I'm a trustee of a community centre, a charity community centre. How those community centres and churches afford this as well is another huge issue. It might their heating costs are massive anyway because it's a bigger building, and it's genuinely frightening, Hannah, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's what I was just going to say, John. That I saw I shouldn't really go on Twitter. Anyway, someone retweeted a thing on Twitter, which was some absolutely nonsense thread about, how to save some money. And a lot of it was stuff like, well, it was basically, go into the office, have a shower at work, charge your phone at the office, all of that kind of thing. Well, that's absolutely fine until your employer goes bust because they can't afford their energy costs. I was chatting with my husband yesterday. He owns people that don't know, he owns an SME in South Yorkshire in manufacturing, and he was telling me, a lot of SMEs are going to go bankrupt this winter, a lot of them, and he's concerned that there is genuinely a massive recession on the way, because this is not just a this is not just a personal problem, and the fact that people, it's not a domestic problem, the fact that people domestically can't afford, to heat their own houses. It's also a problem for the public sector. I mean, most of the hospital trusts are whatever, £100 million in debt anyway, so probably won't bother them too much. But, for small, privately owned businesses, if some of these are, if they're just kind of barely scraping by profit-wise anyway, and then their energy costs, I mean, our commercial energy costs are going up absolutely exponentially. And, my husband's looking at investing in solar and other ways, but if you don't have the means to do that, these increased energy costs, quite simply, they're coming off your bottom line. And what is going to happen then? People are going to get made redundant. And so, you've not only got the situation that people can't afford their domestic energy costs, if their employers can't afford to pay them and either have to, let them go or fold completely, you've got people with no income who can't afford it. This really is the tip of a massive crisis, potentially a huge recession, and it's so worrying.
And it gets worse, doesn't it, Richard? So as Hannah's alluded to there, if businesses don't cope, they lay people off, and it all becomes a downward spiral where the economy gets stuck. And I should just point out some of the things, and Hannah's made a really good point, some of the tips that are out there. Martin Lewis, actually, I got a little bit emotional listening to Martin Lewis because he sounded powerless and upset that is that if you cancel your Netflix or your Spotify or something like that, and that's £100 that you're saving maybe a year, that's a fraction of the extra that you're having to pay every month. There's not the ways of scrimping and saving to make up that, in my case, a £4,000 difference in my bills, Richard.
Well, of course there is, dear boy. Don't you understand that when we were young, we suffered ice on the windows, we didn't really have big fires, we didn't have baths very often because we didn't have a bath? Absolutely no problem. We just need to toughen up. Well, that's the most fatuous thing I've ever heard, to actually hear Tories saying things like that. Yes, those circumstances I just told you were true. That was my childhood, and I spent my political life trying to make sure that no one else lives like that, and that my children weren't brought up like that. And the idea we're going to solve this problem by going down Oxfam and buying some extra jumpers is absolutely fatuous. We've had no sense from the Tory leadership candidates, who have no answer to this at all. Or if they have, they're not telling us, because neither of them are going to be able to do what they're telling the Tory members they're going to do. We actually have a Prime Minister. I don't know whether he's on his second or his third holiday, but he's certainly missing in action at the moment, when a time that we need real action. And so we need to be presenting, and we did briefly discuss this before, coherent alternatives. And we also ought to just crow a little bit about our past. Just how bad might it have been if Ed Davey hadn't been the Secretary of State for Climate Change and Energy, reducing massively our dependence on fossil fuels? Not as far as he'd have liked to because of constraints, but we'd be in an even worse condition. So we have to do some things quickly, and perhaps this is a real opportunity as well. Let's take advantage of a problem. Up till now, many parts of the country have been vaguely aware of things like food banks and inequality, and some people getting all the tax concessions and some people getting none. I would recommend to every Liberal Democrat councillor now to put a motion down to the council asking for a sort of state of the borough, state of the city, state of the county debate. What does the cost of living crisis mean in Liverpool or Stockport or Barnsley? And actually bring those features out and actually talking about what can be done in the short term. In the long term, we've got to change our power supplies. In the short term, what can we do? And that will vary from place to place, city to city. But it's our real opportunity for saying, when, as the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the current Chancellor of the Exchequer says, even people earning 45,000 are going to be in difficulty. This is our time to talk about a fairer society which shares more and which cares more. So let's take advantage of this to really press the Lib Dem agenda.
And I want to give a little bit of a shout out to HQ as well, because actually some of the data they give us campaigners to actually campaign in our area, to localise it. Because as you say, Richard, some people, it's all another issue for some people. They don't quite get it. And then actually the data that the HQ sends us. So I had to put out a press release saying, you know, in just Preston alone, there'll be £113 million more spent on gas and electricity based on just the October rise. And that's money that's now not going into our economy. That's, you know, that's restaurants that aren't going to get customers, shops that aren't going to get customers, businesses that are going to fail, because all that money that would have gone into the economy is now just going up to, you know, to the main energy suppliers. So, Hannah, I'll let you come back in again. But it is, I just want to bring this to the group. So, Tom, if you want to come in after Hannah, why are the Tories being so slow on it? Because Richard mentioned about middle earners. People who are genuinely comfortable do not have £4,000 left over. You know, even those people do not have that money. This is middle earners and businesses is an electorate the Tories cannot afford to lose going into a general election. So I have no idea who's advising them, even from a political point of view, but it's terrible. Hannah.
Yeah, I'll just make the point I was going to make, which was just to echo what Richard was saying about the, you know, that you made, I can't remember, John, the stuff that was coming out from HQ at the minute in terms of the press releases and the data. You know, in Barnsley, we spent a lot of years basically ignoring everything that came out of HQ because it was all about stopping Brexit. Yes, there's nothing there for us. You know, the stuff that is coming out of the Lib Dem press team at the moment is absolutely superb. You know, there's always criticism, you know, of the Lib Dems that, you know, we're a party of the South and we're the anti-Tory party, and it's really hard for those of us in Labour-facing areas, you know, all of which is, you know, is true. But the messages that are coming out at the moment are, you know, are absolutely relevant, I think, you know, all across the country. Really well researched, really well worded. You know, Ed's doing a brilliant job at the minute. Pity Keir Starmer's copying his homework and not giving us any credit, but, you know, nothing changes, does it? No. What was the question you asked, John? Because
it's okay. I'll let you, right, no.
You feel better now, Hannah.
Yeah. It's about what the Tory strategy is here electorally, because we're going to move now on from this to a possible election this year. You know, whether Trust the Terrible will go for a snap election once she's elected as leader on the kind of let's give her a chance, she's only just been elected kind of bounce that she will probably get. She will get a small bounce. But, you know, middle income businesses, lots of people the Tories are pissing off. Why are they doing it?
I just think they're not thinking, to be honest. I think that, you know, it's been referred to as a zombie government, hasn't it? You know, we do have a prime minister, but he's done. And you know what? Who can blame him? You know,
I'll blame him.
Not his job anymore, not his problem. You know, he's done. Why should he trouble himself to, you know, dig the country out of this mess? He's just on his holidays, you know. So I think they're not thinking. I think that, you know, the quality of what Johnson left behind in his cabinet and in his government was so poor. You know, it really was the absolute dregs of the Conservative Party on those front benches. And so they're basically completely incapable, I think. You know, fundamentally, it's the summer, you know, MPs are on holiday, civil servants are on holiday. You know, I think they are kicking their heels, biding their time, waiting for this leadership contest to be over, and then it will become that person's problem. You know, I don't think there is any incentive for anyone in government at the moment to try and make this better when there is this fresh start around the corner. And, you know, we all know it's not going to be a good fresh start, but there will be an element of bounce. And to some extent, you know, you've got a win. For whoever becomes the new Conservative Prime Minister, you've got an early win for that person in terms of, coming riding in on their white horse, and I don't know what they're going to do, cancel the energy cap, penalise all the energy companies, slash everyone's bills. I mean, they might not be planning any of that. They might just be planning to let us all suffer. But, politically, having let it all just linger on like this, there's a really early, easy win for someone. Solve the energy crisis, stop people from having to pay that extra £5,000 energy costs this winter, call a general election, win it.
Tom, as a key target candidate for the next general election, what are your thoughts?
Strangely, I agree with everything Hannah said there, actually. I think that so firstly, I think that your question about the Tories and not having an answer for this is that actually there isn't anyone left to have an answer for it. As much as I disagree with the man on most things, Michael Gove was clearly the only one in that cabinet that had talent, and he's gone. I think that they're not talking to the country as well, John. Now at the moment, they're talking to their membership, which is a very, 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 very small proportion of the UK population. And it seems like they are more interested in culture war issues and things that are so abstract compared to like the horror that is actually taking place in the world. And that's probably why they're talking about it as well, because you don't win a leadership election by saying we're going to go into a recession. Like, we're going to go into a recession and people they have to choose between food or heat. So that's why they're not talking about it at the moment. I agree that there's probably going to be a small bounce. But the choices really start. Well, let's assume that Liz Truss is going to win and there isn't some kind of weird thing that we're not aware of that's happening around Rishi Sunak's campaign. She has a very, very stark option in front of her. Does she gamble and get another 5 years under her belt to kind of and then go past the awful next 2 years that we've got in front of her, and then maybe she can then rebuild it in that 5 years? Or does she gamble but then become the shortest serving prime minister in British history? Because it would be pretty much 4 weeks and you're gone. And I'm not sure anyone wants that legacy. I'm really not sure. But I think a load of us saw the email that went out from headquarters the other day, and I think it was the right thing to do, is to put us. We need to be on an election footing now, because it's the worst thing that could happen is if we can sit around and say, I don't think it will happen. Like Lib Dems, we love to pontificate, don't we? We love to think of the strategy and what will happen and let's just prepare that there is a chance there could be an election in October. I want to be ready. I want to have the funds ready in my seat. I want to have the door knockers ready. I want to have the leaflets ready. I want to be ready to, if there is that election, to fight for every vote possible in Cheadle. So let's not pontificate whether it's going to happen or not. Let's just assume for now that we are going to be facing an election in October. The worst thing will happen is that we've raised more money, we've delivered more leaflets, we've knocked on more doors. That is literally the worst thing that will happen if we start preparing for an October election now. So let's just crack on and make sure, if it's called, we win.
Just quickly, I did have
butterflies then, Tom. Butterflies.
I did have a hilarious thought yesterday morning, which was maybe the Conservatives have decided that their biggest risk is, as Tom says, us raising loads of money, being prepared. Maybe they're thinking if they absolutely skint us by making us pay massive, massive energy bills, we won't have enough money to fight a general election.
Richard, there's basically two trains of thought here. And the original train of thought before the inflation was due to stay as high as it is for as long as it's going to be, probably over 12 months, is that the Tories wouldn't call a local election because they'd have time, whether it's late 2024 or even January 2025, to get over the worst of the economic crisis and then be we've seen you through it, let us finish the job, that sort of thing. But if the economics is going to be so bad up until that point, they're thinking, right, we might just need to go straight away. And I think that's the dynamic that's changed within the Tory party.
I'm a bit concerned that this podcast is becoming an establishment podcast with us all saying nice things about party headquarters. But basically, I do agree with the Sage of Stockport and the Bard of Barnsley. about the scenario they paint. The only slight difference I had, and this comes back to the question you've just asked, John, is there likely to be an upturn in the economy or an improvement in the situation for most people in this country in the short, medium, or for that matter, long term? And I don't think there is. I don't think the Tories are saying anything about these issues at the moment, because frankly, they don't know what to say. If they say the wrong things, they will lose their members. If they say, in political terms, if they say the right things, they'd have to do U-turns on just about everything, both the candidates in the leadership election have said. I don't see any quick solutions to the economic or energy crisis, because on top of everything that we're facing, we're still in worse situation than France, Germany, Italy, etc., etc. Why is that? Because Brexit has reduced our employment opportunities, reduced our education opportunities, created a massive amount of cost in the way we import or export the goods that we need to survive, to have a thriving economy. The only way they can create change circumstances is complete U-turns on 5 key areas, and that ain't going to happen in the next 2 years. We've seen how long it took for Brexit to really kick in and start deteriorating the economy. There are no easy answers. So if I was a Tory, I'd say I've got all these perks in place now. I'm going to hang on to them for as long as I possibly can.
And this raises other points regarding a snap election. So there's what's best for the Tory party generally, what's best for the actual individual MPs. Because if you were, say, one of those new red wall Tory MPs, would you really want an election right now? Probably not. There's also the added thing that we've got to think of, the parliamentary boundary changes will come in next year, which help the Tories. So I was of the opinion that, would they really do it before? Because it disproportionately hurts Labour. My gut instinct is they'll not do it before 2024. But that obviously, as I'll let Hannah come in, but that email did make me think that they could do it. But whether those Tories will risk losing their own seats, their own power, as opposed, will they be thinking about that more than the Tory party? Hannah?
I mean, fundamentally, I wouldn't do it. If I was Liz Truss, why would you? She's got a 75 plus seat majority. She can get absolutely anything she wants through Parliament at all. And
can she? Now,
I don't think that's quite right.
This is one of the things that a lot of people are talking about. Sorry to interrupt you, Hannah. I interrupted Hannah. I'm going to be toast later. But is that Liz Truss's control of the Conservative Party is one of the big things that people are not sure of. Because don't forget, she only got less than a third of MPs supporting her originally. And I know you'll say they'll come together because she's a new...
You know what they're like. You know what they're like. They'll... With the majority, she doesn't even... I wouldn't. Who knows how Liz Truss...
I wouldn't do it either. If I was a Tory...
The one thing I will say in favour of a potential early general election is the Labour Party are a shambles.
Yeah.
They are still an absolute fucking shambles. Are we allowed to swear on Lib Dem Podcast?
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, of course you can.
I mean, I don't know if anyone saw. So Ed Davey put out his radical policy, cancel the October price cap. Not really that radical, is it, in hindsight? But it came out, got loads of press over that, really radical policy. I don't know if anyone saw, but it was when Starmer was on holiday and someone approached, now this isn't just a person on Twitter, this was a reasonably reputable source, but someone basically approached Labour Party for a comment on it. And the Labour Party spokesman's response was basically, this is illegal. You can't be mean to the energy companies and tax them twice. And there's no one thought about the tax tariffs. You'll be breaching the tax tariffs.
It was Rachel Reeves, wasn't it?
Or was it just... the Lib Dems and their creative account. It just basically completely rubbished it. Then Starmer obviously came back from holiday and went, you're all a bunch of fucking imbeciles. This is a great idea that Ed's come up with. And actually, while we're at it, let's cancel the next price cap as well. And we'll actually cost it. Well, we'll pull a figure out of our backsides, but we'll call it fully costed. smacked them all down, got his press release out, got loads of press about this, this brilliant Labour plan. Okay, fine, Keir, it took you a little while. Yes, he stole our policy and didn't give you any credit for it. But for me, the thing that really stuck out was that while he was on holiday, they were going, oh no, that's a rubbish idea that the Liberal Democrats have come up with. They've still forgotten who they're fighting, lads. It's not us you need to beat. It is the Conservatives. And then Starmer came back and, in essence, did a complete U-turn on that and said, actually, no, it is a good idea. And actually, it's our policy now. We're going to adopt it. And, they really are. They are still a shambles. They're squabbling amongst themselves. The left of the party isn't with them at all. Starmer's kind of like first plan was, to purge the Corbynites and, get Corbyn out of the Labour Party, distance himself from them, which I think, to be fair to him, and, I'm not always fair to Labour, he has done. He has done a reasonable job of, but he's not yet done the next part of his plan, which is, and what does Keir Starmer's Labour stand for? No one knows. So actually, from Liz Truss's point of view, this is a good time to go into a general election because she might lose her majority, but there is not a chance on earth Keir Starmer and Labour are going to win one. Not a chance in hell. No way.
I think this plays back to the thing you're saying earlier about how Labour are scared of their own shadow and they're constantly just thinking like, you can just tell they're overthinking of everything that they're doing. And the energy cap thing, I'm certain that there was someone in Labour headquarters that were thinking of that already, and they were probably focus grouping it. They were probably going through various meetings to discuss how it would work, whether the tax tariffs would work, all this kind of thing, where Ed Davey's just gone, good idea, let's do it, and then that's why we beat them on the press, because they were overthinking it. It reminds me of one of my favourite ever quotes was from Bob Paisley, the great Liverpool manager. And he said, it will be a paraphrasing, I can't remember the full quote, but he said that whenever he has a player that comes to him and says, well, I had the ball in the area and I didn't know whether to pass it or shoot or whatever, Bob Paisley's response was like, well, just put it in the back of the net and then we'll discuss your options afterwards. And that's the problem. The Labour Party aren't doing it. They're not putting the ball in the back of the net. And that's allowing us, actually, and several times with water, with utilities, cost of living, the amount of times we scoot them on an idea, which then they've had to kind of play catch up on.
And it's interesting, Labour, you talk about Labour not having their head in the game particularly. So one of the big issues that we know, and we've talked about on this podcast, is the Tory attack line at the next election will be coalition of chaos. That will be something that's good. So Labour have announced, it might have been yesterday, might have been the day before, saying under no circumstances will they do any sort of deal with the SNP or with nationalists, is what they said. But here's where they had a problem, is the fact that Labour are in a deal with Plaid Cymru in Wales right now. And so they couldn't even get that right and talk to their own counterparts in Wales, the one part of the country where they're actually in power. Labour is in, I think Hannah summed it up perfectly. In fact, Labour are nowhere near coming to the table to win a majority. Richard, your thoughts? Cards on the table, Richard. Will there be an election this year before Christmas?
No, I would be extremely surprised if that ever happened. I don't think either of the two big parties want it, although Labour Party, of course, claim they do. They're in no way to fight it. I find it ironic that they're going to have their party conference in Liverpool, which is the worst council in the whole of the United Kingdom. So if you want to see what Labour Party actually do in action rather than principle, I'll do guided tours for Labour members while they're here. And we can talk about our own energy crisis, for example. £16 million up the Swanee because they failed to negotiate electricity contracts in time. That's on top of 19 million lost on road contracts, etc., etc. They don't want it, because I don't think the Labour Party sees solutions either. And the solution actually doesn't lie in the cap, because as I understand the cap, that won't actually stop prices going up. It's a theoretical cap. What we need is to tax the buggers who are actually making huge profits out of this crisis and redistribute that money where it's needed. And Keir Starmer's Labour Party won't talk about that either, but that's all we can do in the short time. Take the money from the people who are making extortionate profits and use it to alleviate the needs of ordinary people in this country.
And I think, like Richard alluded to earlier, the one hope that comes out of this really horrible time, and I should just point out, as well as the financially, the effect on mental health for residents is extraordinary. And we've got to put it out there as well, what this might do to crime levels and other such things in our communities. These are all consequences.
And physical health as well, John. There's a reason, God, I don't even know whose government was, way back in the day, they gave all those pensioners an extra couple of £100 towards the heating bills. People with, chronic respiratory conditions, people with arthritis, people with long-term medical conditions. You need to live in a warm, dry environment. It's not just asthma. Exactly. It's not just the cold. I live in a very old, unrefurbished Georgian house, and we have the heating on all winter already at great personal expense. I can't even begin to think about how much that's going to cost us this winter. And it's not to keep the house warm, because actually it doesn't keep the house warm. But it keeps the place slightly drier. The house would go mouldy in the winter, because it would not just be cold, it would be so damp. And that is the same for a lot of people. The impact it has, not just on mental health, but literally on people's physical health, if they are not in a warm, dry environment. People will literally die this winter. People will literally die because they cannot keep their houses warm and dry. They cannot dry their clothes. It's absolutely terrifying. It is. It's heartbreaking.
And I think as we come to the end of this podcast, there's a lot of advice out there. And like Tom was alluding to, there's also people that want to make money from giving you advice, which we will. But the first thing anyone should do who is concerned with any of their bills is actually contact their supplier. That's what, because they have a legal duty to have to discuss with you about lowering your payment terms and things like that. Don't go and get extra credit cards. Don't cancel your direct debits. Don't do some of the stuff that is rumoured out there. The first thing you should do is actually talk to your energy company and tell them that you might be financially struggling going forward. And then they have a legal process they have to follow with you. But in the meantime, what we've got to do, as from a politician's point of view, is that whatever happens, whether there's a general election or not, there's got to be a new round of local elections next year. And that's our chance to thump the bastards. And I'm not going to make anything. In fact, if the general election,
sweary this podcast,
it is, and it's not you for a change. But from my point of view, I don't think we're going to have a general election before 2024. It means we're going to have 2 rounds of local elections where we can punish the Tories for what they're doing for this country. And that's what will make a difference. That's what will make them actually sit up and say, actually, we've got to do something better, and might lead to people like Tom being the MP in hopefully in less than 2 years' time. That's what we've got to do. But you can't wait for the Tories to implode. We've got to go out, deliver those leaflets, knock on them doors, get that information from HQ and use it. Actually use it. Put a press statement out. Get it yourself in the paper. The HQ is trying to help us. We've now got to grab it, because HQ are the generals. We're the foot soldiers that's got to win this war. And that's what we've got to do. Hannah's laughing at me. I don't know if that's because it was such a bad analogy.
Fighting talk from Council.
Fighting talk. There we go. So we'll have
bluebird.
Oh, no. That's us getting a copyright infringement. And maybe a defamation clause against us.
I was just trying to be Gracie Fields.
We've got a lot of editing to do today, John.
We have got a lot of editing. But we want to thank everyone for watching. Like I said, we are going to be at conference. We'll probably do more episodes before then, because we've got loads of stuff coming up, not to mention the ending of the Tory leadership and what that actually means. So thank you very much, Tom, Hannah, Richard. We're going to have brilliant episodes coming up. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching, subscribing and listening. We really appreciate it. We'll be back with another episode very soon. In the meantime, any questions, any suggestions for episodes, anything at all, you know where to contact us, so please do. So on behalf of everyone at the Lib Dem Podcast, have a great rest of your day.